Good morning, USA. I have a feeling that we're going to win today. Hey guys, Bryn here. Welcome back to another King's Indian attack speedrun video. I might be posting this one a little bit late. I'm recording this as like the same time I'm usually uploading them. Oh, and we're getting a King's Indian, straight up a reversed King's Indian, which is great. So generally here, the move is e4. Do we play it? I think we should. So the idea behind e4 is that if takes, and they try taking the pawn, they don't actually win the pawn. We always have this knight takes e5 as a result. Right after it, so we're going to play e4 here. There's two ways they can play. Again, they can try this taking stuff, which doesn't work out. It looks like the pawn is hanging, but it's not, I promise you. Okay, I promise. Yeah, so they end up actually trying to go for it. But again, we do have the ability to take on d8, and now we can take on e5, and we're a-okay. Knight takes e5. We win back our pawn, and we also have mass development because of it too. So I feel like we're doing good because of that. We're going to continue our development normally. We don't have to go crazy, you know. The punishment has already been laid out. That's how we should think about this. So one thing I want to prevent kind of is this bishop d6. But I don't know if we need to. We have knight c4 as a reply, which is a tempo. So I'll play knight c3. If they play bishop d6 developing, then I'll play knight to c4. And yeah, they're not doing that, which I think is fair. I'm looking at moves like knight to b5 as well. Bishop to e3. Even like b3, fianchetto. But fianchettos, generally, we already have one fianchetto. We don't need another, I think. So that would be a bit of a waste of time. So I'm not going to do that. Instead, I will play the move that looks useless, but is useful, h3. I want to prevent knight g4, and I want to bring my bishop to e3. This knight is really hard to develop. And if they develop not on c6, they also run into other issues where it's going to be hard to develop this guy. It's going to take them a long time. They're going to have to move this guy, move this rook to b8, either push or move the bishop and then push. They're going to have to do something along those lines. But in that time, I could have a move like bishop f4, which could haunt them a little bit, which is nice. So we got lots of moves there. So let's play bishop to e3. And I want to bring this A rook into the game. It's the only piece not doing anything. But look at their pieces. They're kind of weirdly coordinated, right? The knight doesn't really belong on the back rank. And, you know, like, things just feel incorrect. And that's kind of the beauty of how we've been playing is we haven't really done anything crazy, but we don't need to. Because they're the ones that tried to take the pawn early when they really couldn't. So this is what I meant of we might have some bishop f4. It looks like here it's not necessarily possible. They're trying to go for this b6 idea, which I think is smart. I'm just wondering if I have like f4, f5. But I don't know if it's working. But it doesn't matter because we have knight c6 in some lines. So I think we should just play a natural looking move. Maybe like a3. a3 kind of looks good. Or even a4. I'm going to play a3. It's kind of like a non-distinct waiting move. This looks like it loses a piece. Yeah, this looks like it loses a piece. So I think I'm just going to take this piece. Because I think they missed that our rook is also covering that square. And now we're winning the game. It's unfortunate. I was hoping to see a little bit more of a battle in terms of what's going on there with the pieces of, like, you know, trying to get their b6 move in time. I want to take on b7, but then they take on b2 as a result at the end of it. Like, they play rook b8 and then rook b2. It won't matter too much because we're up material. But at the same time, I want to make sure that we, you know, put up maximum pressure. Knight d1 looks interesting with the threat of taking on b7. But we are also undeveloping a piece, so that doesn't really feel correct. Instead, let's just double up. Yeah? Doubling up looks good. Oh, you know what? We could have taken with the bishop instead. That's a totally reasonable move. So, that's okay though. Not a big deal. I will take this with my bishop. All right. Now I can take this with my bishop, and I'm thinking of it. I could also sack an exchange, but that feels really silly when, you know, that kind of gets them back in the game at least a little bit, like hope-wise. I want to take this pawn before I play knight a4, which is what I want to play next, because I want to play c3 and kick this bishop off of its beautiful square. So here, we got to be careful a little bit, but not too much, because they have threats of bishop f2 in the position. As you may see, bishop f2 could be annoying. Luckily, it doesn't work because our knight is defending our rook, and they can't play bishop takes c3 and bishop f2. If they could, then they're a better player than me. So we just don't move our knight. If we move our knight, then bishop f2, all of a sudden, we're still winning because it's two pieces versus a rook. In this type of ending where, you know, we have an extra pawn on the queen side, I think that's objectively winning. But there's no reason to go into a position like that, right? So they have to take back. I'm not sure what they're thinking about. Maybe they think they can take here, but then they're like, because sometimes you're like, oh, okay, if they, you know, do this, then I'll do that other thing. And then you get like stuck in that mode. So that could be it. You never know. I was really hoping to see like a mainline King's Indian where we're up at tempo. It's unfortunate. But we were close. People generally like to take that pawn because they think they can, right? It's unfortunate, but we got a really good position out of the opening, so can't really complain there. I'm just gonna play King G2. This does a few things. Maybe instead of King G2, maybe I should play something like Bishop D5, which looks a little strange, but has some good ideas behind it. Mainly with the idea that I'm trying to make sure that Rook B8 I can always meet with something like Knight A4. And they can't really take my knight or anything. Like the bishop's safe here, because if they ever move their bishop, then it's defended in other ways. So we're all good. And I want to bring the bishop to C4 here. There we go. I just like the bishop on c4. I like playing aesthetically. And now I'm going to bring my king up. And again, one of the other reasons is because now if they ever play rook b8, they're not actually attacking my bishop on b5 anymore. So now I can play moves like knight to a4, which might not look the most aesthetically pleasing, but objectively this should be winning after knight to a4. So they can go and take the pawn. I think it's ill-advised because then I have the move rook to b1 here. And they'll have to go bishop b5 and go into it. They'll have to trade down into a position where they're objectively lost. Yeah, so they go back, and they do have a threat of bishop takes f2. So I should curb the threat by playing the simple king g2. Now it's not check. They can play bishop f6 or something, but bishop f6 just offers a trade. As long as bishop f2 is not check, then we're okay. And now c3 is an even bigger threat. Alright, let's play c3. Everything is safe here. It's really hard to attack either of these pieces. First off, they're on light squares, so the bishop can't attack them. So we only have to worry about can the rook attack them. And the only way it can is by getting to the 4th rank somehow. And that's not easy. Let's play rook d7. And it looks like this is going to force them to play rook to c5, yeah. And now it looks like I can take this guy. And they end up resigning. And I think the reason why is because we have a really interesting reroute. We can play knight takes c5, knight e4, knight d6, and they can't defend it again. They're gonna end up losing the pawn, unfortunately. So that was a really fascinating game. Let's go over it quickly. Yeah. Also, I'm wearing a blanket. I probably should have mentioned that at the start. I'm just really cold. I'm feeling cold today. You know, like when you wake up and it is like kind of winter. So maybe that's part, you know, that's contributing to the fact of why I'm cold. We have the AC on, or the heater. Some people, like, AC is sometimes just called cooling. I call it AC as in just, it's controlled by one thing in my house, so it's like, I call it AC because, like, it doesn't matter, but it's, you know, it's the same thing. So, like, if you turn it up, then it goes up, the temperature goes up. If you turn it down, the temperature goes down. So I just call it AC for everything. But I'm a little chilly today, even though we have the heat on a little bit. Sometimes I get cold. All right, so we got a normal King's Indian attack here, and I was really excited and hoping for some sort of d4. By the way, don't mind the computer here. The computer generally hates these types of openings, the King's Indian defense, because of the space imbalance, right? But I think that this is just an excellent position for us to play. I think it's a lot of fun. You know, we can play moves like a4 here, which is actually one of the top moves. But don't mind the eval, just because, well, again, it's all about really the space, and the computer doesn't like that as much. But we are in a tempo up King's Indian, and King's Indian is played by some of the top players in the world. So, you know, if they can play it as black, then I'm sure we can play it as white, a tempo up. I think we'll be okay. Anyways, so in this position, generally what you'll see is some sort of like bishop e7 or something, and then we play knight to c3. They push, and then we go knight to e2. This is kind of like a, again, a reverse King's Indian where we're a tempo up. Some of our ideas involve playing knight to d2. Sorry about that, I just sneezed. I cut that out, I promise. So yeah, we can play some sort of like knight e2 stuff here, and generally our idea is going to involve some sort of like knight d2 and f4. They can play in a few different ways. Like, I think something like b5 is really interesting, and the idea behind b5 is they're trying to go for like a very quick c4 here. They could also try castling, which I think is very reasonable, knight d2. And there's a few options here. There's moves like, again, b5. There's knight e8, which is really interesting. Also, bishop e6 looks like it's okay now, which is interesting. It's because they have knight g4, right? Yeah. So we're not quite in time to play like this. But another idea we have instead in this position is, let's just say they castle. We can also try knight h4 instead of knight e1 or knight d2, because, well, they're not actually attacking our knight yet. So when we play f4 or something, let's just say they play something like b5, right? And then I play f4 and they play knight g4. Now knight to f5 is a very good move. Because, you know, they don't really want to take, but they're kind of forced to in this position where it just opens up our bishop in like the most beautiful way. And the center is a little closed enough to where the fact that this diagonal has been opened because of f4, it's not really going to matter too much. And you can see a game where it kind of did matter a lot in our last game that was played in this series, because I almost got crushed if I were to play a little inaccurately. Even just a little bit, I could have easily lost. So yeah, this is a great way to play. Just remember, these knight h4 to f5s are really good. Even if you lose this pawn 99% of the time, it's going to be worth it, just because this bishop just becomes a monster. You don't even need b5 to be played, by the way. It could be some other move, but the bishop can become the best piece on the board, and here's a great example of that. And that's why I played b5, is I wanted to show something like this in the game. But yeah, going through, so they ended up taking on e4. Hopefully, again, we'll get some reverse King's Indians to show. But, you know, since they took, we should talk about what happens if they take. And again here, one light variation we should look at is what if they take on d1 twice? Or take on d1 and then they take on e4. Because now there's a funny idea. After knight takes e5, what if they try taking on f2? And funnily enough, this is not good for them. Because we can take on c6 with check and then take on f2. And now we're winning, which is great. So just remember that variation of it might be a little weird to give up your beautiful light squared bishop, but hey, if you're winning a piece, then you're winning a piece, right? Sometimes you gotta deal with it. And yeah, so they can't really take on d1 and then take on e4 like that. But if they try taking and we take on e5 and take on e5, we can still end up in a position like this. And this is extremely good. Just remember, if something like bishop g4, there's a few moves here. Rook e1 is probably like the most natural move, but there's also rook d5. Rook d5 is really interesting. Rook e1, you just gotta recognize that you don't have to worry about knight f3, losing your light squared bishop, because knight f3 is a blunder, thanks to check. So that would be a piece. It's only one piece because they have bishop d5, but you know, like this is probably winning, to say the least, right? Yeah, so those are just some tactical things to recognize with this e4 move. Is it might look like it's hanging at first, but if you're a King's Indian player as black, then you know this stuff quite well already. Or maybe you don't, and you just learned something new. So I'm happy to have been a part of that. There's also moves like bishop g4, but again, since we're a tempo up, it doesn't really matter too much here. One other variation to look at, I guess, that could be important is bishop g4 here. But luckily, again, even though bishop g4 prevents knight takes e5 as a result, so right now they are threatening knight takes e4, we have a few ways we can reply to this. And we want to be a little bit careful, because they might play some sort of knight d4. We do at the very least have rook to e1. And the idea is after knight to d4, we can always take. And if they were to take on f3, knight d4, we always have bishop d1 and c3 coming. And I think we're actually just better here. The computer might say like slightly better. I objectively think this is better. We have the bishop pair. We'll control d4 where they're not controlling d5. Our bishop will actually find like a really comfortable square in b3. We don't need it fianchettoed anymore, which is kind of funny because the e4 pawn prevents it. We're most likely to play f3 in these types of structures. We'll play bishop b3, and a4. There's actually a Kasparov game that I should cover as a video coming up, now that I'm realizing it, because this is shown in the King's Indian Defense as black, where Kasparov played a really, really nice game in this type of endgame. And yeah, I think that would be really, really good to cover how well it can go in these types of positions. Yeah, so again, all of the tactics work out as long as you recognize those things. Bishop to g4 here as well deserves a mention, but generally it looks like we can take. And yeah, we could maybe even play c3, but if you're a little worried, then I'm not sure if rook e1 works as well. Rook e1's an interesting move because now it looks like knight takes e4 might work. Oh, yeah, no. We can still take on e5, right? I was a little scared of this because after rook d1 check rook e1, there's a bishop takes f3. But luckily, we don't have to be forced into this variation because we can still take on e5. Again, all the tactics are working out for us. I think that's about it for those tactics, so we'll leave it there. And if they enter these types of positions, this is significantly better for white, as you can see. It's equal material, but the development, even in endgames, matters so much. And it's not even just the fact that we have more development, but also they have difficulty developing in the first place. Like, it's one story to be a little bit behind in development, and then it's another story to be unable to develop. Like, how are they supposed to develop both of these pieces easily without the b pawn hanging? If the b pawn hangs and I can just take it in these positions, those endgames become pretty much immediately winning, even though it's just a pawn. Because now c5's weak, a7's weak, and we have targets that we can continue to attack while also being up a pawn. If we have pressure and a pawn, then generally it's close to winning. So after knight takes e5 here, knight to f6, natural move, because we did have some rook e1 threats actually. I'll just actually highlight that. So if they play something like a6, now rook e1, actually bishop takes e4, my bad. Never mind, ignore me. I was thinking of a rook e1 where knight f6, knight g6, which also is actually completely winning, so don't mind me. I know what I'm talking about, I swear. Let's see here. So knight to f6, knight to c3. I was also considering things like b3. Turns out that's actually a-okay here. I thought I'll just keep my pieces in the center, and that was reasonable. h3 looks like a little bit of a waste of time, but it's not. Like, the idea is just to prevent knight g4 if I ever play bishop e3, and I can just reroute. I can bring my knight back to f3. Generally, the reason why I'm thinking like this is because this knight is undefended, and it's not really stable yet. Like, the thing is, they could play f6 at some time and kick my knight away. So I want to be careful that I don't just, like, randomly hang my knight or something. And if they ever kick my knight, I also want to recognize where does it want to go. There's knight d3, there's knight f3. But the second I move the knight, all of a sudden, g4 becomes undefended. So this is like a very, very prophylactic move that could maybe not even be an issue for a long time. Like, if I play bishop e3 here, what if they do play like knight d7? It's not a good move, but let's just say they play it, and we... Actually, that's a bad example, because it doesn't allow knight g4 afterwards. What about bishop d6? Yeah, bishop d6. So my idea was knight c4, and after something like bishop c7, now knight to g4 could come into play. But the problem is that we still have like knight b5. So tactically, these things are just not working out, so it's hard to even show examples of reasonable moves that they could play, because they just keep getting hit with moves. Okay, yeah. Anyways, I played h3 mainly, again, because now knight g4 is kind of like blocked out for either of the pieces in the future. And the pawn's not really weak if it's being attacked and defended once. Like, it's not really a consideration. I could also play something like g4 now as well, because then I'm always threatening to play g5. But alright, bishop to e3 to attack the c5 pawn just a little bit. You know, I might be threatening some sort of knight e3. They played knight e6, defending it just enough, so now knight d3 is kind of ruled out because it's defended enough, and they'll just maybe continue on with their way. So, yeah, that's why I just decided to take the file. a3 is probably objectively a waste of time, but at the same time, it's one of the top computer moves, so that's cool. Other moves were king h2, which I was hesitant to do because it brings the king away from the center, and this is more like a queenless middle game more than it is an endgame. So king h2 is reasonable because of that, but generally, if things go into an endgame, you want your king closer to the center, not on the side of the board. So I was a little hesitant to play that. Knight to b5 is also showing up as well, but I'm happy with a3 if it's showing up in the engine. And then they end up just losing a piece here, which is unfortunate. I was really expecting b6, but the problem is b6 runs into knight c6. And after knight c6, rook to b7, the funny thing is I don't have to take the bishop immediately, because it's hard to move the bishop anywhere where I can just like not... Like, I can play f4 here, is what I'm trying to say. Because if they ever play something, let's just say, like bishop d8, unfortunately, this guy is under threat, and we can take on d8 and take on b7 here. This looks quite good. There's other moves too in the position, like f5 actually probably just wins the piece, or like knight d4, and then we take. But regardless, after they lose the piece, of course the game's over, and it's just a matter of conversion at that point. And I think you guys got the gist of things after the conversion part. So I don't think I need to cover it this time. Maybe I'll make another video in the future of like how to convert when up material like that. I still am working on the how to attack video, I swear. So that will eventually come out. There's just lots of plans. I want to come up with more ideas that aren't just these run videos, even though I do like them. Like they're a lot of fun to do, but I want to branch out a little bit and do some more instructive stuff. So that'll be coming soon. Yeah. All right. Thanks guys for watching, and I will see you tomorrow. Bye bye.